Lonely rich rancher saw her fixing his fence in the rain, then realized she'd been homeless all along. Jack Morgan walked slowly onto the wide porch of his ranch house, holding a steaming mug of coffee. The smell of fresh rain mixed with the earthy scent of the land, and he inhaled deeply, letting it fill his lungs. From here he could see almost all of his property, the rolling green pastures, the fences stretching far into the distance, and the cattle grazing lazily in the wet grass. The sky was heavy with gray clouds, and the wind whispered through the trees. It was quiet, almost too quiet, and Jack felt a familiar loneliness pressing at him. Despite owning a vast ranch, the kind most people would dream of, he realized that he rarely had company besides his hired hands, who came and went with little personal connection. Jack took another sip of his coffee, letting the warmth flow through his hands. He had built this ranch himself from scratch over decades of long days, early mornings, and exhausting nights. Every fence post, every barn, every stretch of pasture had been touched by his hands at some point. And yet, for all the accomplishments and all the land he owned, he felt a persistent emptiness. Work and responsibility had filled his life, yes, but they had also filled the space where relationships and friendships could have been. As Jack gazed across the pasture, a movement caught his eye. At first he thought it might be one of the ranch hands, but something about the figure seemed different. She was small against the wide expanse of land, bending near a section of the fence that looked older and weaker than the others. Even from a distance he could see her working with determination, hammering and adjusting the wood. Her clothes were darkened by the dampness in the air, and her hair stuck to her face in wet strands. The rain had begun lightly, and she didn't seem to notice or care. Jack's curiosity was piqued. Who was she? He hadn't seen her before, and he certainly hadn't asked anyone to work on the fence. He squinted, trying to make out more details. Her movements were careful but hurried, and there was an air of focus that made her seem almost fearless. Most people would have sought shelter the moment the rain started, yet here she was, alone, attempting to repair his property in the wet and cold. Without thinking too much about it, Jack set down his coffee and stepped off the porch, pulling his coat tightly around him. The wind tugged at the fabric, carrying the scent of wet earth and grass. He walked along the gravel path leading to the fence, each step crunching softly under his boots. As he drew closer, he noticed her hands were red and rough from gripping the wet wood. Her jacket was soaked, and despite its thickness, it was clearly not keeping her dry. "Hey!" Jack called, raising his voice slightly over the gentle drumming of raindrops. "Do you need some help?" The woman froze for a moment, then looked up at him. Her eyes were wide, tired but alert, and she seemed both startled and cautious. For a moment, Jack thought she might run, but instead, she shook her head. "I can manage," she said softly. Her voice was calm, yet there was a quiet strength in it that made Jack pause. He studied her for a moment. Most people would have already sought shelter or called for help, yet she continued to work with a quiet persistence that caught his attention. Jack could see the careful way she held the hammer, the way she adjusted each nail with precision. There was a kind of pride in her work, an almost stubborn refusal to let the weather or circumstances stop her. "You shouldn't be out here in the rain," Jack said again, a little firmer this time. "It's easy to slip or hurt yourself. Why don't you come inside for a minute?" She hesitated, glancing at him, and for a moment he saw something flicker in her expression. Uncertainty, pride, maybe even fear. "I'll be fine," she said, shaking her head gently. "I just want to finish this." Jack frowned. There was something about her determination that he couldn't ignore. Most people would have given up, or asked for help without hesitation. But she seemed different. He felt a strange sense of responsibility stirring within him. He stepped closer, holding a towel from his coat. "Here," he said, "take this. You're soaked. At least dry your hands and face." Her eyes softened slightly, and after a small pause, she accepted the towel. Jack watched as she wiped the rain from her face, her skin pale from the cold. There was a quiet dignity in her movements, a resilience that he hadn't expected. "I'm Jack," he said, extending his hand in greeting. "This is my ranch. I don't think I've seen you here before." "I'm Emma," she replied, her voice quiet yet steady. "I was just passing by. I saw the fence.
and it looked like it needed help.
Jack raised his eyebrows. She had no uniform, no tools beyond what she'd carried herself, yet she was here, repairing his property with no request or expectation. There was a humility in her voice, and he found it rare and refreshing.
Are you...
A carpenter? He asked, curiosity growing. No, she said honestly. I've done odd jobs here and there. I like fixing things when I can. It feels good to help. Jack nodded slowly. There was a simplicity in her explanation that made him feel relaxed, in a way he hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. Most people he met had hidden motives, demands, or expectations. But Emma seemed sincere, focused only on the work in front of her. The rain began to fall more heavily, drenching the grass and soaking through their clothes. Emma didn't move immediately. She let the water fall over her face, closing her eyes for a brief moment. Jack noticed the shiver that ran through her and, without thinking, removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. You really should take this, he said gently. You're going to catch a cold. She hesitated, but then nodded and accepted it, tucking it around her small frame. Thank you, she said quietly. There was no arrogance, no sense of entitlement, just gratitude. And Jack felt something stir inside him. It had been years since anyone had thanked him in such a simple, genuine way. They worked together in silence for a while, passing tools and holding the fence steady. Jack realized he felt at peace. There was something comforting about the quiet companionship, the shared effort. Neither spoke much, letting the rhythm of hammering and the rain fill the space between them. You really didn't have to do this alone? Jack said, finally breaking the silence. Emma looked at him, tired but determined. I wanted to, she said. It seemed right. The fence was broken, and someone needed to fix it. Why not me? Jack felt admiration and concern swell within him. Who was this woman, and why did she have such courage? He realized he didn't know much about people these days. He had built walls around himself, much like the fences he maintained, walls that kept people out. And yet, here was someone quietly breaking through those walls without even trying. As the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle, the fence was at least temporarily repaired. Emma stepped back, wiping her hands on the towel Jack had given her. She gave a faint smile, tired but satisfied. Jack nodded, feeling a sense of wonder and curiosity about her. He didn't know where she had come from or where she would go next, but he knew the quiet strength she had shown today had left an impression on him. Thank you, Jack said, his voice soft. For helping.
Emma shrugged as if it were nothing. It was nothing, she said.
But Jack could see the pride in her eyes, the satisfaction of a job done well. For the first time in years, Jack felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just relief, not just accomplishment, but real hope. Hope that maybe the rain had brought more than wet clothes and mud. Maybe it had brought a beginning, a chance for something unexpected to enter his life. And as he watched Emma adjust the last board on the fence, Jack realized that life sometimes offered surprises in the most unlikely forms. Strangers who appeared in the rain, who didn't ask for anything, but who somehow reminded him that the world still held unexpected moments of connection. After the rain eased into a soft drizzle, Jack and Emma stood quietly near the patched-up fence. The air smelled fresh, earthy, and alive. The cattle had wandered off to find dry patches of grass, and the clouds above were breaking into faint streaks of sunlight. Jack wiped his hands on a rag and leaned against a fence post, watching Emma inspect her work. You did a good job, he said finally, his voice breaking the quiet. This section should hold for a long time now. Emma gave a small smile, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. Thanks, she said. I try my best. Fences are important. They keep everything in place. She looked at him, eyes thoughtful, as if considering whether to say more. Jack felt a pull of curiosity. There was more to this woman than met the eye. He had seen her determination, her quiet strength, but there was also something hidden behind her eyes, a story she wasn't telling. You must work a lot with your hands, he said casually. Do you do this kind of work often? Emma shrugged. I do odd jobs, she replied. Anything I can do to keep moving, to earn something. Fixing fences, cleaning yards, helping people, whatever needs to be done. She paused and added softly, almost as if she were talking to herself. It helps to feel useful. Jack nodded, sensing a quiet loneliness in her words. He had spent so many years focused on his ranch and business that he rarely thought about feeling useful beyond the work he did for himself. Here was a woman who had far less yet seemed to find meaning in simple acts of helping. Do you live around here? He asked, keeping his tone casual. Emma hesitated, looking away for a moment, and then shook her head. No. Doc, really, she said. I move around a lot. Sometimes I stay with people who are kind enough to let me. Sometimes I just find a place outside. It depends on where I am. Jack frowned slightly. Something in her voice hinted at hardship, but she spoke as if it were a normal part of life. He could sense her pride, the way she carried herself despite obvious struggles. Outside? He asked cautiously, trying not to sound judgmental. Emma met his gaze, her eyes steady.
Yes, I've managed.
You learn to adapt. You do what you have to survive. It's not easy, but it's life. She smiled faintly, as if trying to make light of something difficult. Jack felt a mixture of surprise and concern. She had been living without a stable home, surviving day by day, and yet she worked in the rain without complaint. Her strength amazed him. You have been homeless? He asked carefully. Emma nodded. For a while, she admitted, I've been on my own, moving from place to place. Some towns, some farms, some cities. I do what I can to get by. She looked down at her hands, calloused and red from the rain and work, and Jack noticed the quiet resilience etched into every line. Jack felt a pang of guilt, realizing how sheltered his own life had been. He had money, land, comfort, and stability, things she had gone without, but she carried herself with a grace and determination that he found humbling. That must be hard, he said softly. Emma shrugged.
It's not easy, she said, but you learn.
You learn to value small things, a warm meal, a dry coat, a safe place to sleep. You notice kindness when it appears, and sometimes that's enough to keep going. Jack listened, absorbing her words. There was a wisdom in her tone, a perspective that only hardship could teach. He realized he had spent years worrying about money, property, and success, but he hadn't really understood what it meant to struggle to survive. Emma had faced life's harshest challenges and had done so without complaint, without losing her dignity. I can't imagine how difficult that must be, he said finally. And yet you still came out here, in the rain, to fix my fence. Why? Emma looked at him, her eyes serious but gentle. Because it needed fixing, she said simply. Someone had to do it. And 'cause I wanted to. I like feeling that I can make a difference, even in small ways. Life feels better when you help someone even if you don't know them. Jack was quiet for a moment, thinking about her words. There was a purity in her intentions, a simplicity that was almost foreign to him. Most people in his life had motives, expectations, or demands. Emma had none of that. She had given her effort freely, without asking for anything in return. He wanted to understand more, to know her story, but he also wanted to respect her boundaries.
Emma, he said carefully, if you need somewhere to stay,
even for a little while, I can help. I have space, and it's dry here. Emma's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of surprise and hesitation. She seemed to consider the offer, her pride warring with her need. After a long pause, she smiled faintly. That's kind of you. I don't usually accept help, but maybe just for the night.
Jack nodded. Just for the night. You don't have to worry about anything else.
She looked down at the ground, her fingers tracing patterns in the wet dirt. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice carrying a depth of gratitude that touched him. It means more than you know. As they walked back toward the house, the rain slowed to a drizzle, and the sky brightened with hints of sunlight breaking through the clouds. Jack led the way, carrying some tools and materials they had used for the fence, while Emma followed, wrapped in his coat. There was a quiet companionship between them, a sense of trust building even in these early moments. Inside the ranch house, the warmth and smell of wood and fire welcomed them. Jack led Emma to a small, tidy guest room with clean sheets and a warm blanket. "Here," he said. "You can rest. I'll make some tea, and we can talk afterward if you want."
Emma nodded, setting down her few belongings.
"That sounds good," she said softly, a tired smile on her face. She looked around the room, noting the cozy simplicity. It was far removed from the places she had been sleeping. Cold streets, abandoned barns, and the occasional charity shelter. She felt a strange comfort here, a sense of security she hadn't known in months. Jack left her to rest while he prepared tea in the kitchen. He poured steaming water into 2 cups and carried them to the small table near the window. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving the air fresh and clean. He gestured for her to sit. Emma took the seat, holding her cup carefully. They sat in silence for a moment, letting the warmth seep into them, letting the quiet settle between their words. Jack studied her, noticing the details he had missed before, the way her hands moved, the small scars on her knuckles, the faint lines of worry etched into her face. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" he asked gently. Emma looked down at her tea, swirling it slowly. "Yes," she admitted. "More than most people know. But I've survived. I've learned a lot along the way. I've learned to be careful, to trust sparingly, and to find hope in small things." Jack nodded. He felt a deep respect for her, mixed with a growing curiosity. There was so much about her he didn't know, so much he wanted to understand. And yet, he also realized that part of her strength came from the fact that she didn't rely on anyone. She had survived alone for a reason. "You don't have to go back out there tonight," he said finally. "You can stay here, rest, and I'll make sure everything is safe. No one will disturb you." Emma smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "Thank you," she said again. "It's nice to be safe for once." Jack nodded, feeling something warm stir in his chest. He had spent so many years alone, yet now he felt the first spark of connection he hadn't realized he was missing. There was a quiet understanding between them, a recognition of shared humanity, even across the gap of their very different lives. They sipped their tea slowly, talking about small things at first: the weather, the ranch, the cows, the work of maintaining fences. And as the conversation grew, Jack began to understand the depth of Emma's resilience, her intelligence, and her quiet courage. She had survived in ways he could barely imagine, and yet she carried no bitterness, only strength and a willingness to keep going. As the evening wore on, the sky darkened with the soft glow of sunset. The warmth of the house, the smell of the tea, and the soft sound of rain dripping from the eaves created a calm, safe space. Jack realized that in this simple, quiet evening something important had begun. A connection, fragile and new, but real. Emma looked at him with gratitude and something like wonder. "I haven't had a place like this in a long time," she said softly. Jack smiled faintly. "You're welcome here," he said, "for tonight and as long as you need." And in that quiet moment, both of them understood that this encounter in the rain, by the broken fence, had changed something in their lives, opening the door to trust, understanding, and perhaps a friendship that neither of them had expected, but both silently hoped for. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of the guest room, casting soft golden streaks across the floor. Emma stirred awake, feeling the warmth of the bed and the quiet safety of the room. For a moment she closed her eyes and just breathed, letting herself feel comfort, a sensation she hadn't experienced in months. The sound of birds singing outside and the faint rustle of leaves in the morning breeze reminded her that life could still offer peace, even after hardship. Jack knocked lightly on the door before opening it. "Morning," he said gently. "Breakfast is almost ready. I hope you slept well." Emma smiled faintly, sitting up and brushing her hair back. "I slept better than I have in a long time," she admitted. She felt a small sense of embarrassment at having let herself relax so completely in a stranger's home, but the warmth and kindness in Jack's voice made her feel at ease. "Good," Jack said. "Eat first, then we can see if the rest of the fence needs work. I want to make sure it's completely fixed before the storm comes back later." Emma nodded. The thought of working with him again brought a sense of familiarity, something she hadn't felt in a long while. They walked together to the kitchen, where the smell of freshly cooked eggs, toast, and coffee filled the air. Jack moved around with quiet efficiency, and Emma watched him for a moment, noticing the ease and comfort with which he managed the large ranch. It was obvious he was used to responsibility, to the care of the land and animals, yet there was a gentleness in his actions that made him seem approachable and kind. They sat at the table, and for a while they ate in comfortable silence, each appreciating the simple act of sharing a meal. When Emma finally spoke, it was about the smallest things. How the cattle had been moving near the fence yesterday, the way the rain had softened the soil, the smell of the earth after a storm. Jack listened, smiling occasionally, noticing the way she paid attention to details most people would overlook. "You have a good eye for things," he said after a while. "You noticed the broken post before it could cause real trouble." Emma shrugged modestly. "I've had to notice things like that before," she said softly. "When you don't have much, you learn to watch carefully. You can't afford mistakes." Jack studied her, noticing the way her hands moved, the subtle tension in her shoulders, and the quiet pride she carried despite obvious hardship. He realized that she had survived difficulties he could hardly imagine, and yet she spoke without bitterness or complaint. There was a resilience in her that was rare, and it made him feel both admiration and concern. "Emma," he said carefully, "you've been through a lot, haven't you? You don't have to talk about it if you don't want, but I want to understand." She paused, setting her fork down and looking at him. For a moment there was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, a guardedness born of years of self-reliance. Then she took a deep breath and began to speak, slowly, deliberately, choosing her words carefully. "I've been on my own for a long time," she said quietly. "I lost my family when I was young. No one really stayed around. After that, life just got harder. I had to move from place to place, taking odd jobs, finding temporary shelter wherever I could. Sometimes people were kind, sometimes not. I learned to keep going, to not rely on anyone, because relying on someone usually means being disappointed." Jack felt a pang in his chest. He had known loneliness, but not like this. He had never had to worry about where he would sleep, whether he would have food, or if someone would treat him kindly. Hearing her speak so calmly about survival in the face of repeated hardships made him feel a mixture of guilt and awe.
"Emma," he said gently, "I had no idea."
"You've really endured so much, and yet here you are, still standing, still working, still helping strangers like me." Emma gave a small, almost shy smile. "It's not about helping strangers," she said. "It's about keeping myself going. Feeling useful keeps me sane. And sometimes helping someone, even in small ways, makes life feel better. For both of us, maybe." Jack nodded, deeply moved. He realized he had underestimated her strength, and at the same time he became aware of the deep care he felt for her well-being. She was not just a stranger who had appeared in the rain. She was someone who had survived unimaginable hardship and carried herself with dignity and grace. After breakfast, they stepped outside to inspect the fence again. The rain had left the ground soft, and the sunlight reflected off puddles scattered across the pasture. Jack handed Emma a hammer and a few nails to check some of the weaker boards. Together, they worked quietly, passing tools and adjusting posts. The rhythm of the work was comforting, and neither spoke much. Words weren't necessary. There was understanding in the shared effort, in the way they supported one another without needing to explain everything. Jack couldn't help but notice Emma's hands, the calluses, the small cuts, the evidence of hard work and survival. She didn't complain, didn't ask for help, yet the effort she put in was immense. He felt a swell of admiration for her, and at the same time a deep desire to protect her from the hardships she had faced.
"Emma," he said, carefully stopping for a moment. If you need more than just a night here, I can help you. You don't have to go back out there on the streets.
You can stay here as long as you need. Emma looked at him, surprised, her hands pausing mid-work. For a moment, her pride battled with the reality of her situation. Then she looked down at the ground, and a flicker of relief crossed her face.
I don't usually ask for help, she admitted, but thank you.
That means more than I can say. Jack nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. He understood the weight of her words. He had offered something she had likely never had before: stability, safety, and trust without judgment. And she had accepted it, quietly, with dignity intact. They continued working on the fence, talking about small things: the weather, the land, the livestock. Slowly, the conversation turned to Emma's experiences, her skills, and the odd job she had done along the way. Jack listened, fascinated, realizing that her life, though difficult, had given her a depth of knowledge, adaptability, and courage that few people ever develop.
You've really learned to handle a lot on your own, he said finally. It's
impressive. Emma smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting a quiet pride.
I had to, she said simply. Life doesn't always make things easy.
You either adapt or you don't survive. And I wanted to survive. Jack was silent for a moment, reflecting on the simplicity and strength of her philosophy. It was a reminder of how much he had taken for granted in his own life. The stability, the land, the resources he had always known would be there. Emma had faced uncertainty every day, yet she carried herself with courage and grace. By the time the fence was fully repaired, the sun was high in the sky, warming their damp clothes. They stepped back to admire the work, and Jack felt a quiet satisfaction, not just in the physical repair, but in the trust and understanding that had grown between them.
You did well,
he said, finally smiling. It's solid now. It should last a long time. Emma nodded, brushing her hair back and wiping sweat from her brow. Thanks, she said. It feels good to see it done, to know something is fixed because of my work. Jack looked at her, feeling a deep respect and concern mingled together.
Emma, he said gently, you've been through so much and yet you're still strong, but you don't have to face the world alone.
Not anymore.
Emma met his gaze, and for a moment, they shared an unspoken understanding.
She had survived on her own for so long that accepting help was difficult, yet the kindness he offered was genuine. She felt a flicker of hope, something she had rarely allowed herself to feel in recent years. The day wore on, and Jack suggested they take a break. They sat under the shade of a large oak tree, drinking water and enjoying the warmth of the sun. Emma leaned back against the trunk, closing her eyes briefly. Jack watched her, noting the tension in her shoulders slowly easing, the calm settling over her features.
You're not used to resting, are you? He asked lightly.
Emma shook her head, a small smile on her face.
No, she admitted. I've always had to keep moving.
There wasn't much time to stop. But it feels nice, sitting here, not worrying about where I'll sleep tonight. Jack nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He had spent years alone, yet he realized he had rarely appreciated the simple comfort of being safe, of not having to worry constantly. For both of them, this moment was new and quiet, yet meaningful. As the afternoon light softened, Jack thought about what he could do to help Emma beyond tonight. He had resources, space, and stability, things she had been without for months, maybe years. He wanted to offer her more than temporary relief, but he also knew he had to be gentle to let her feel in control of her choices.
Emma, he said softly, if you want, I can show you around the ranch later.
You can meet the animals, see the land. It's a lot, but it's peaceful, and I think you'd like it. Emma opened her eyes, looking at him with quiet curiosity.
I'd like that, she said. I've never really had a place like this. Never really had the chance to just be somewhere safe.
Jack smiled, feeling a warmth in his heart. The bond between them had grown steadily, quietly, from that first moment in the rain to now. He knew that helping her was not just about fixing fences or offering shelter. It was about giving trust, patience, and kindness. the thing she had been missing for so long. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting golden light across the pasture, Jack and Emma sat together in companionable silence. The repaired fence stood strong, a symbol of care, effort, and new beginnings. And in that quiet shared space, both of them realized something important, that life could offer hope, connection, and trust, even in the most unexpected circumstances. The morning after they had repaired the fence, the ranch was alive with gentle activity. The sun was warm, stretching across the wide fields and illuminating the green pastures. Jack moved about the property as he always did, checking the cattle, inspecting the fences, and making sure the barns were in order. But today there was a quiet sense of anticipation in the air, one he could not explain. Part of it was Emma. She had stayed overnight, and her presence had shifted something inside him. There was a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, a sense that life could be fuller, lighter, more meaningful. Emma had emerged from the guest room refreshed and more relaxed than Jack had ever seen her. Her hair was brushed, her clothes dry, and her eyes shone with a quiet determination that matched the woman he had first met in the rain. She stepped outside and took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the earth, the grass, and the faint sweetness of wildflowers scattered across the pasture. For the first time in a long time, she felt rooted, not in ownership or permanence, but in the safety of a space where she could simply exist without fear. Jack watched her from a distance, leaning against the porch railing. There was something in her posture, the way she moved, that drew him in. He realized that it was more than curiosity. It was admiration, concern, and something like hope. She had endured so much, yet here she was, bright, capable, and alive. She represented resilience, courage, and the quiet beauty of survival. And in turn, she had opened a space in his life that he hadn't realized was empty.
Emma, Jack called gently, would you like to see the rest of the ranch today?
There are some spots that are special, places I think you'd appreciate. Emma looked up, a small smile spreading across her face. I'd like that, she said. I've seen a little, but I'd love to explore more. Jack offered his hand, and together they began walking along the paths of the ranch. The morning sun warmed their backs as they moved through fields dotted with wildflowers and pastures alive with cattle. Birds sang in the trees, and a soft breeze carried the gentle rustle of leaves. Emma's eyes lit up at every new sight, her fingers brushing over the fence rails, her attention drawn to the smallest details, the way the sunlight hit the grass, the reflection of clouds in a small pond, the sound of water trickling through the irrigation channels.
You notice everything, Jack said quietly.
It's like you see the world differently than most people. Emma shrugged, glancing at him. I guess when you've lived without much, you learn to pay attention to what's around you. You appreciate what most people take for granted.
Jack nodded, feeling the truth in her words.
He had spent decades surrounded by abundance, yet he realized he often missed the beauty in simple things. Emma's perspective reminded him that life could be observed, appreciated, and cherished in ways he had long forgotten. They walked in silence for a while, letting the calm of the land fill the space between them. Then Jack led her to a small hill that overlooked the entire ranch. The view was breathtaking. The pastures stretched as far as the eye could see, the cattle scattered like tiny dots, and the horizon touched the sky in a perfect blend of blue and gold. Emma's eyes widened, and she inhaled sharply, taking in the beauty of the scene. It's beautiful, she whispered.
I've never seen anything like this. It
feels like freedom. Jack smiled. It is. That's why I built this place, why I've worked so hard for it. But I think sometimes even with all this land, I forgot what it means to feel free. He paused, looking at her. And now seeing you here, I realize freedom isn't just about land or money. It's about having a place where you can be safe, appreciated, and cared for. Emma turned to him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and curiosity.
You really care, don't you? She asked softly.
Jack nodded slowly. I do. More than I expected to. I didn't know someone could change the way I feel about life in just a few days. but you have." For a moment they stood in quiet understanding, letting the view and the wind speak for them. Jack realized that his feelings for Emma were more than admiration. They were a deep protective care, a desire to see her thrive, happy and safe, and he understood that she had touched a part of him that had been dormant for years, a part that craved companionship, trust, and genuine connection.
As they walked back toward the house, Emma's expression grew thoughtful.
"Jack, I don't usually let myself feel hopeful," she admitted quietly. "I've had to be cautious for so long, and trusting someone has always been difficult. But with you, it feels safe. I can believe in something better." Jack reached out and lightly touched her arm.
"It is safe," he said gently. "You can trust me."
"You don't have to face the world alone anymore. Not if you don't want to."
Emma smiled, a warmth spreading across her face that seemed to echo the sunlight around them. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt she could allow herself to hope.
The weight of her past, the endless nights of uncertainty, the hunger, the fear, didn't disappear, but it felt lighter because someone cared, because someone believed in her. The days that followed were filled with quiet routines and small joys.
Emma helped around the ranch, learning the rhythms of the land, caring for the animals, and discovering the satisfaction of seeing work completed and appreciated. Jack watched her closely, offering guidance, but always allowing her to act independently.
He admired her skill, her patience, and the way she approached tasks with thoughtfulness and care. They shared meals together, talking about everything and nothing, stories of childhood, the challenges they had faced, and dreams for the future. Jack learned about Emma's life on the road, the kindness of strangers who had helped her, and the lessons she had learned from surviving hardship. Emma learned about the ranch, the work that went into maintaining it, and Jack's life, his successes, his solitude, and the longing he had never admitted to anyone. One afternoon, after finishing a long day of work, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip toward the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of pink, orange, and gold, reflected in the quiet ponds scattered across the pasture. Jack felt a deep sense of contentment, a feeling he hadn't known in years. Emma's presence had transformed his ranch from a place of work and responsibility into a home filled with laughter, companionship, and warmth. "Jack," Emma said softly, her eyes following the flight of birds across the sky. I don't know how to thank you. You've given me more than a place to stay. You've given me trust, kindness, and hope." Jack shook his head gently. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You've earned it. You've survived, worked hard, and shown strength that inspires me every day. I'm glad you're here. That's all that matters." Emma's eyes glistened with emotion.
I feel like I belong here, she whispered.
"For the first time in a long time, I feel like I have a place in the world."
Jack reached out and took her hand, a simple gesture of reassurance and connection. "You do," he said firmly.
You belong here, Emma. You've earned it. And you're part of this life now.
You don't have to be alone anymore. A sense of peace settled over both of them. The ranch, once a place of solitude for Jack, had become a place of companionship, care, and shared purpose. The fence they had repaired together in the rain was more than just wood and nails. It was a symbol of their growing trust, of the support they offered each other, and of the new life they were beginning together. Over the next weeks, their bond deepened naturally. They laughed together, worked together, and shared quiet moments in the evenings, watching the sun set over the rolling fields. Jack realized that Emma had brought a light into his life he hadn't known he needed, a light of resilience, understanding, and genuine human connection. And Emma realized that she had found more than a temporary shelter. She had found a place where she could be safe, valued, and truly herself. One evening, as the sky darkened and the stars began to shine, Jack and Emma sat on the porch in silence. The cool night air carried the faint smell of grass and earth, and the ranch was quiet except for the distant sound of animals settling for the night. Emma rested her head lightly against Jack's shoulder, feeling the warmth and steady presence beside her. "I never thought I'd find this," she murmured. "A place where I can finally feel at peace." Jack smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And I never thought I'd feel this, he admitted. A life that isn't just about work or solitude, a life with someone who reminds me what really matters. The stars above seemed to shine a little brighter that night, reflecting the quiet joy and hope that had grown between them. In each other's company, they had found trust, comfort, and a sense of belonging that neither had expected, but both had secretly longed for. And as they sat together on the porch, the vast ranch stretching into the night, both Jack and Emma understood something essential. Life could be harsh, unpredictable, and lonely, but it could also offer connection, kindness, and the promise of new beginnings, if one allowed it. For Jack, the lonely rancher, and Emma, the woman who had survived so much, the rain-soaked encounter at the broken fence had become the start of something extraordinary. A friendship, a bond, and perhaps even love had grown from that first act of courage and kindness. And as they looked at the land they both now cared for, they knew that whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together, stronger and no longer alone.